welcome to Focus Today. I'm Steve Johnson. You know, we all want to be connected in one way or another, no matter what that connection is. Maybe it's your favorite chef you'd like to be connected to if you're a person who likes that area, or maybe connected to a banker or a financier. How would you like to be connected to the most connected man in America? Well, Perry Atkinson had a chance to talk to this connected guy, Peter Strople. And here's their discussion on Focus Today.
Well, today we have the honor of talking to somebody that perhaps you have heard of. His name is Peter Strople. He's been called one of the world's great rainmakers, the most connected man in America, and one of the most connected people in the world. He's the former director of Dell Computer Corporation and the Grid System Corporation. That's the company that invented the modern kind of like clamshell style laptop that we all use. In 2008, he created Friends of Peter to bring business and community leaders together to affect his philosophy called Instant Change, where he helps businesses do the change not in a matter of months, but literally in the matter of hours. Fascinating gentleman, and I think his heart passion is dealing with children's issues, combating child abuse, supporting foster care, reforming education. In fact, he and his wife Kelly, from 2003 to 2007, housed 16 people in their home with the goal of helping those families get out of debt, establish a new foundation for the future. So what an honor it is to have with us today Peter Strople. How you doing, my friend?
Good. Thanks, Perry. I appreciate it.
Ah, wonderful. Listen, your own life story is fascinating. Going from being put up to adoption, to the corporate top of the world. Give us a little synopsis of your life story.
Wow. Yeah. We were born. Our mother was a single mom, and she tried to keep us in the first year of our life. And we were told that she actually put us up to adoption, and then she actually went and got us back. And then she had to put us up the second time. So it was about 3 years later is when my father, Doug Strople, actually adopted us. And within 3 years of our adoption, his wife died of cancer. So my dad didn't, necessarily want young kids. He was an executive, but he was kind of stuck with us. And the next couple of years, up to the time we were about 8 years old, we were just being bounced around from home to home. Anybody that could look after us, because I was told he had a nervous breakdown at that time, and he ended up remarrying a woman that was much older than him, but wasn't a very nice person. And we had kind of, you can imagine waking up every day and kind of terrified and not knowing how you're going to be treated. And there was certainly no love in the home. And my twin sister ended up leaving home at 14. And about a month later, I followed her out. And I was lucky. At the time, I was playing hockey, and the hockey team actually put me up in a home. But my sister had to go from, house to house and, I think spend time on the streets. But I was always fascinated by the fact that we kind of started out in life together, but we've gone very different paths. My sister lives in a mobile home today. Her front teeth, they're, knocked out of her face. And it's just a horrible, horrible life. And we're actually trying to get her to move down here to Texas so we can get her teeth replaced, so we can get her to smile again. But I never thought I'd ever be anybody. And I was fascinated because I talked to my friends and say, there's something that happened in the first year of our life that must have been amazing love. Because I knew what love was, even if I didn't really understand it. I knew what it was. I had experienced it before, and I think that's what helped me get through a lot of things in my life. I was very lucky. I had coaches in soccer, coaches in hockey that really made a big difference in my life. And when somebody believes in you, it makes a big difference. I don't think my sister had that same opportunity. Actually, I know that. People, especially men, try to take advantage of her. And that's really what her life's been about. But, I wanted to be a hockey player. That was my goal. And a friend asked me if I'd be interested in, during the summer, when I was young, to be part of a, kind of a summer job with IBM Corporation. And when they first put my picture in the newspaper, we got a call from a chairman of an oil company who said he wanted me to come down and see him. And I never understood how significant that was, because in hockey, everybody and their dog wants to meet you. Everybody wants tickets. Everybody wants somebody's autograph. But what happened in that moment is I saw the company kind of freak out, because they said, you're telling me this CEO called you. And I said, yes, he did. And he wants to meet with you tomorrow. Yeah. And you actually say he called you. And I was just, again, I started to see how that's not normal. And what happened is the next day, they actually, I lived in Calgary at the time. They actually brought an executive out from Toronto, literally on a red-eye flight overnight, to be at the meeting with me. And when we got to the, this top, floor of this company, and walked into their big, boardroom. I've never seen a table as big as this one, and we're sitting, two guys sitting at the very end. But as we walk down, I'm thinking, I don't even know what IBM stands for, As we're walking up to the end of this guy stands up and he says, "Hey, Peter," and shares my hand, and he says to a gentleman beside him, he says to the other gentleman, he says, "You guys need to go talk technical. I want to talk to Peter alone." Whoa. And immediately I started, apologizing. I don't even know anything about this. I don't really know much about the company. And he said, "No, I don't want to talk about business. I want to talk about hockey." and then we sat down, and he told me, he mentioned his son's name. His son was a 14-year-old goaltender at the time. And at the time I was scouting for the New Jersey Devils. And he said to me, he said, "Do you know my son?" I said, "I do know your son." He said, "Would you think your son, do you think my son could get a scholarship to a U.S. university?" And I said, "I think absolutely he could do that." And he said, "Would you be a reference for him?" And I actually took out my New Jersey letterhead and actually wrote on it a reference for him and handed. And that day we kind of authorized us to be anything we wanted to be. And I realized at that moment, I mean, most people just want to, there's all these kind of can't buy moments in life that you can create. And I really kind of, if you look at my life, it's really about that. It's I want people to meet people they dream about. I want people to have experiences and treated in a way they would never thought they'd be, created or treated. Yeah. And I want people to be kind of just be who they are.
That is absolutely fascinating. So out of that came your internship with IBM?
Yeah. So what happens? I spent 2 years with them, and in a sales role, and eventually they actually asked me to look after one of their largest accounts in Canada, and within about 3 months of that, we lost the business. And I'll never forget, our president flew in and was sitting with me, and what happened? And I said, "Well, we had this meeting, and this is what they said. And what did you say?" And well, I said this. And what did they say? They said this. And then he stopped me and he said, "Peter," he said, "how long have you been with us?" And I said, "Well, about 2 years." And he said, "You know everything the way that the book tells you to say it, but you don't believe it." And I'll never forget that. And then he said, "If the only thing you know is that we're a big company, that's all you say. Everything else is fake. If you can't understand that." And it changed my view on everything in regards to because again, you always want to be the best. And one of the things that fascinated me about business is whenever I ask somebody who they are, the first thing people would tell me is, "Well, I got a PhD from Harvard," and I remember thinking, why is that the first thing people talk about? Because I was lucky to get out of high school,
Wow.
And I was sitting there thinking, but they're using that as kind of a judgment of who I am. And I realized that I'm the dumbest guy in the room. And I always just say that. I'm the dumbest guy here. I don't even know what you're talking about, and the big words. And it was amazing how many times when I asked people, "What did you say? Can you just describe it to me?" And I asked people to describe it like I was a baby. I mean, literally, I don't understand what you're talking about. And what happens, I had people come up to me afterwards and say, "Peter, oh my God, I'm so glad you asked that," because I didn't know what the guy was talking about either. And I remember thinking, this is so funny. These guys are executives, and they don't have the gall to be able to say, "Look at this. I don't understand what you're saying."
Wow.
But I've never kind of lost that ability to ask the stupid questions, I guess.
What's so fascinating about this, obviously, you were given a break, and out of that came a passion for you to connect people. Tell me about that.
Well, again, it was just when I was sitting in meetings, because there was somebody significant in that company or in my clients who said something, who I had to create a relationship with, and there's something about me with them that they said, they saw me as something special. And I think the one thing they said is that, I never tried to be anybody. And, because everybody, there's friends of mine are billionaires out of Dallas. And I'll never forget, a few years ago, I asked them, I said, so what's your perception of me? And they said, Peter, what we tell people is that he never claims to be anybody, yet he can pick up the phone and call anybody, and they said that he can call people that we wish we could call.
Wow.
And he said, everybody that they meet tries to be bigger than they are. So they always have to do a lot of background, because people aren't going to be real about who they really are. And that was just fascinating me, so again, because I don't know much when we're talking about a subject matter, I don't care what it is, or we're saying, what are we going to do? Do you know anybody at because our dream customer is Walmart, as an example. If I know the former CEO, or if I can get to the CEO, why wouldn't I do that in that moment? And in that, just literally as we're thinking, we can actually add them to the conversation in regards to what their perception is and what we're talking about. And is it relevant to their company? If it is, who's the right people for us to be talking to? So that's what.
I'm going to take a break here in just a second, but you had another life-changing experience, and it was just recently, 2003, you had a heart attack, and that really changed you. Can you give me a quick response to that?
Well, it's actually my second heart attack, and my first was in 2003, where I was effectively gone. And that really changed who I am, and we can talk about that. But then 9 months ago, I had another massive heart attack, and I have to get my heart replaced here in the next 2 years. But I also had a stroke. So what you're getting me is, 9 months after my stroke, and some of my words that I miss because of that. My brain's kind of a little bit over time, but. Yeah, absolutely. If I have to say this, if I had a chance to have it or not have it in both situations, I would hit the button to have it, because I've learned so much about life.
I want you to share that. We're going to be right back with Peter Strople right after this.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Okay, we're back, and we're talking to a man who's been given several titles: the most connected man in America, one of the most connected people in the world. Peter Stroble's with us, and he's had a couple of life-changing experiences in his life just recently, with a heart attack and a stroke. And Peter, as we went into the break, we were talking about how this has changed you, and yet, if you could choose not to have them, you would choose to have them. Why?
Primarily because of how it changed my life. And I used to always say to my friends that this statement that needs are finite, wants are infinite, and time is finite, money is infinite. And I realized that when you don't know if you're going to be here tomorrow, which is what happened the first time in 2003. I wasn't aware that every day I was wondering if today's the day I'm going to die. It really starts to change who you're sitting with and what you're talking about and what you're spending your time on. And I started to become much more fearless in regards to, why are we talking? This is what we're talking about isn't even relevant. We're not going to make any difference today. And the other thing is it forced me to be the best I could be, because if I'm only got an hour with somebody, I don't want to have any to-dos, because I'll never be able to. I just didn't know if I'd ever be able to get back to them and honor what I said I would do. So I had to figure out a way to do it now. And that's one of the reasons why I started picking up the phone and calling people. I said, listen, I'm going to make the conversation happen right this moment because we need it. But I also want you to know this person, and I want him to know you're a friend of mine, just in case. And I actually started to change it a little bit too. Say, if I can't make that call, here's the thing, here's the number, but you call him and say, by the way, Peter says he loves you. That was really important for me to make sure that my friends knew that I cared about them. And it's become kind of a amazing journey I have a lot of friends of mine say they pulled a Peter Strople today because they picked up the phone and called somebody, and I'm going, yay, that's about time, But it really changes something when you're kind of, I would say everybody needs an agent. And I don't know why people stand up and start telling the world about who they are and, trying to act like there's something. And I realize that, I want to be the agent. I'll be the one telling my friends who they are to my friends. And I'll say things that are bigger, and they'll say, Peter always, makes me much bigger than we really are. And I said, you know what? That's who you are to me. It's okay. But,
wow.
You're amazing. So.
A couple things came out of this. A philosophy you've created called instant change. Now, I would assume that that's even been magnified since your health issues, because you want to do it now. You want to impact lives at this very moment. Is that what that's about?
Well, it is, and it actually started with a child. After my first heart attack, my wife wanted to help start a foster care agency with a friend of hers. And at the time, I didn't believe it was relevant because you can imagine in Dallas there was 20,000 kids had been abused in the previous year. And when we started to look at what a new foster care agency would look like, I asked who's the biggest one today, and the biggest one only handled 100 kids. Wow. So if you're sitting over 20,000 kids in need and you only can create the biggest one today, even if we got lucky, it would be only 100 kids. I said, we're not even going to make a difference. Well, after my heart attack, all of a sudden, what my wife wanted mattered. And where I didn't think it was make sense before, I said, you know what, we've got to do this. The first child that I met was a child that had been set on fire by his parents. Whoa. And this child was 90% burned. Whoa. And I couldn't believe, first of all, I was thinking his parents. So his whole idea of what love is and who's safe, he didn't have that. And then he was in the system. And the system was actually bouncing around from home to home because he didn't sweat, he bled. And so he started to bleed into mattresses. Wow. Well, then one family put plastic over the mattresses, which actually made them bleed more. So all of a sudden happened in that moment, I said, and my wife and I were driving back from Dallas to Austin. I said, hey, listen, how can we act like we've never met him? I said, because he changed me. He changed who I am and how significant this issue is. This kid grew up in a rich community and he got burned, So even the worst, this is what blew me away. Some of the most Christian and some of the wealthiest communities are the worst abusers. That's what I didn't understand because I thought it was going to be a poor issue. I thought it was inner city, and it wasn't anything like that. But then I started to go back into business and say, look, if my idea of how do we love this child today, he's my customer. How do we set love? I don't want him to ever experience any pain. I just want him to have an amazing life. Well, I can't walk into any business after that and start looking at any business problem and say, well, hold it. What's the critical need? And right. How do we make this so that we can love this business today? Wow. Are we adding value in what we're saying we do? And wow. Sometimes, and then that's where instant change came from. I want to instantly change somebody's life today by the fact that we have hope, but we can also bring the smartest people to the table. Just ask what's the next thing we need to do today.
Peter, you're another living example of something I've often say with the 30 years of doing Christian radio and television. Whatever God saves you from or brings you through, he turns around and makes you a minister too. And you're clearly an example of that, you and your wife, Kelly, so I commend you. Is it possible today for businesses to embrace love in their operation instead of bottom line?
No, I believe it does. And we actually just launched a program called Be Human, the Be Human Project, and we launched it in St. Louis about 2 weeks ago. And we had 60 CEOs in the room, and only one came up to me afterwards and said, this whole love thing is kind of weird, And truthfully, when I sat back and looked at his life, I'm sorry, my screen went out here. I apologize.
You're okay.
But,
You're okay.
Yeah. Okay, I didn't know. Yeah. So when I saw his life, I could see where there was, again, everything was a transaction, even in regards to his own kids. In regards to they were more of a problem. There wasn't much love in the way he treated his family, and I've always been fascinated when you look at crisis. And this really hit me in 2010. I finished the year and I had 1,400 meetings plus, and so every day I was meeting people that somebody asked me to meet. And these are all significant people asking me to meet somebody significant. And I started to realize that most people don't know who they really are. And when people start telling me about what their dreams are or what their business was created to do, they start to sound very similar. I didn't see anything really unique. And so when I started to look at a person that was in crisis, I couldn't change the fact that a business had the same, as an entity, had the same issues. Huh. And I actually created a thing called the home plate. And I wish I could send this to you so you could see it, but it's pretty easy to even describe. I said, because vision statements and mission statements don't really mean anything. And when you're in a crisis, nobody believes in any of them. Even the people on the team, even the executives don't really care. So what I realized is that a home plate is really just a big square. And if I just put it into 4 corners, the first corner, it's like a clock. The first 15 minutes of anything is where you're most passionate.
I actually have a picture of it here. So go ahead.
Yeah. So you can see that top right-hand corner is where passion and love exist.
Right. Right.
So why would you create something if you're not passionate about it, or do you love it? Yeah. And what happens is that most people can't describe why this business was created. And you can see the people that came in later, the people don't really are tied to the founders. People are kind of answering their own kind of reason why they think it needs to exist. But it wasn't the way that it existed in the beginning. And I honestly believe that that's God. God creates something, puts that epiphany in somebody's mind that said, this needs to exist. So the next thing is, once it's there and you believe this is needed, what makes you unique versus everybody else that claims to do the same thing or want to do the same thing or is passionate about the same thing as you are? Well, that's your life story. It's who you are. It's all the journey that you went on makes you unique. And truthfully, if you talk to people about what that uniqueness is, it's beautiful. Yeah. That's a beautiful thing, right? Yeah. So everything on the right-hand side of the home plate is who you are, but everything on the left is what you're going to do to make a difference. And that's why I say, now, based on your passion, based on what makes you unique, how do you make an impact? And how does that impact based in truth? And have you ever made an impact?
You're saying something here that's so powerful, because you and I probably have seen not only companies that were born out of a passion of an individual go to the next generation and fail. We've seen ministries go to the next generation and fail. Something fell through the cracks when it was passing the baton.
Well, it's interesting. If I use this in a church environment, and I've done this when I've met with leaders of churches, and I ask them what their passion is, and they say God. It's Jesus Christ. And I go, okay, but can I ask you the question? I said, you're a church. Isn't that kind of a duh? Yeah. Because God's in everything. So what's your passion? Well, our passion really is about kids, or it's about the community, or it's about elders. All of a sudden, you start to understand as a business where they're different. Right. You're saying, because again, God's into everything. And so then what makes you unique in relationship to that passion of children? Oh, it starts to really become clear in regards to what they're doing and why they're creative.
Peter, I know this is not a fair question, so forgive me, but to give you only a few minutes to answer this question, you are fascinating with how your journey from being given up for adoption to where you are today on the other side of 2 heart attacks. What would you say would be your life statement to those listening? What have you learned? If you could summarize it all up, what do you want people to know, not only about you as a person, but what you've learned, what you want them to know about life?
Well, one is that relationships are critical, and they're not transactional. These are true relationships where these are people that really care about you. And what I believe is that you can't be the smartest person. You can't be the expert. We have to be honest with our friends, which means sometimes we have to have a third party to validate what we're about to say, because we don't want to hurt anybody. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is that most people don't have real relationships. And I can tell you, even if just using a home plate, you can validate the relationships in your life. Do people, are they passionate about the same thing you are? Mm-hmm. And I'm always fascinated when I ask somebody. There was a story a few years ago. I was speaking in university, and they asked me to look at a social psychology program that was going on down the road. And when I sat in, and they had kids age 5 to 11 years old, and all they asked these kids to do is draw a picture of 25 cents, just a quarter. And when they were done, some of the kids drew it the size of an orange, and some kids drew it the size of a dime. So then they were wondering, why is it so different? And they realized when they looked at the kids' backgrounds, the kids that were rich, it was nothing. That's why they drew it the size of a dime. The kids that were poor, it was big, it was huge. They didn't have 25 cents. So it's very significant. So perception is the first thing. If the kids don't even have a perception of 25 cents is 25 cents, when you ask somebody, who am I? How do you describe me? And in that moment, if your friends can't describe you in a way that makes sense, they don't know you.
Wow.
That's why the home plate was so critical, because I wanted people to say, if you can't literally check each corner of the home plate in somebody that you love in your life, then they don't know you. And that means you have to change perception of who they are and who you are to them.
Peter, you're an inspiration, and I'd like to continue a series with you, quite frankly, because I think you could mentor thousands of people through media, but I've gained much from our time together today, and what an inspiration. Thank you so much, and let's get together soon, okay?
Perry, I'll be honest, I can't thank you enough for your time.
Known as the most connected man in America. Well, without extending it out too much, I think that we may be talking to one of the most connected men in the world coming up in our next segment, as we are going to be talking with Rabbi Steven Rosenberg, the executive producer of the TalkBack program. What's happening in the Middle East? Why are some of these shrines being blown up? We're going to get his perspective coming up on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Welcome back to Focus Today. I'm Steve Johnson, and we are going to move our focus from the United States to the hotspot of the world right now. And of course, as many have said, really is the linchpin is Israel and that whole Middle East region. With us is Rabbi Steven Rosenberg. He's the executive producer of the TalkBack program with Dr. Lawrence Gelman. It is great to have you here, and I'm glad you were able to cut some of your time available for us to talk with us, Rabbi. Okay, I can't hear what he's saying. Let's see if we can patch you through. I think we've got. There you go. You're on now, Rabbi.
All right, there we go. Let's try this again.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to be here, and it's very nice to be speaking to you, Steve.
You know, this is a week that I think, from a standpoint, it's hard to keep up with what is happening in the news, because all of the Middle East conflicts seem to be melding together, and they're not separate as they have been in the past, or at least so we have thought they are. And I think of some of the things that we've seen that have left people kind of scratching their heads. Why is this happening? We've been covering a lot what's been going on, of course, in the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and of course in Israel. We also, prior to that, talking about what was happening with ISIS in Iraq, which frankly was quite a new organization for a lot of us, all of a sudden gaining power in that area. And most recently, we've seen the desecration of what others would say are historic sites. Others who perhaps are of a more have a belief system would say these are religious sites. And I think a lot of people are wondering. I think, for example, of the video that we had seen of the tomb of Jonah that was exploded just most recently. And I think a lot of people saw that and could hardly believe what they saw, thinking, even just from a historical standpoint, if you don't agree with the backdrop of why that might have been built, this is a desecration. But we have seen that before, and then another site was also further destroyed. What is your perspective on this, and were you surprised to see ISIS taking this action?
Yes, I was, to a certain extent, but some of it has to do with the fact that ISIS, which is this group that believes in reestablishing a fundamentalist caliphate in the Middle East. And when we talk about a caliphate, we're talking about a state, an Islamic state, going back to Sharia law, which is pretty harsh for somebody who may know what that is, and especially for women. Sharia law is a very, very discriminatory set of fundamental policies with respect to how people should interact with each other in a fundamentalist way. And I think we need to really say at the onset here that not every, this is a minority of Muslims that believe this. ISIS is a group who is Sunni, who believe in reestablishing this caliphate. More importantly, though, they are so fundamentalist that they believe that having these shrines is tantamount to idol worship. And the shrine that we've been talking about is in Mosul, in Iraq, and it is historically, now, again, this is up to a lot of conjecture, but it's historically the tomb of Jonah the prophet. Now, Jonah the prophet is a prophet in Christian tradition, in Jewish tradition, and in Muslim tradition. And there's a lot of controversy whether this is actually his tomb or not, but it's a revered place. The interesting thing, you saw the video as I did, and probably some of your viewers did too. They put explosives inside the mosque. There's a mosque that's covering the tomb, and blew the entire thing up. Mm-hmm. The other thing I think that is very important to understand, and it's the most underreported part of what's going on in the Middle East, is that Christians in Muslim lands today are very much under oppression. And for some reason, CNN and Fox and MSNBC and all the rest aren't covering it. And there are a lot of Christian families in Iraq and in Syria and in Lebanon and a lot of other places that are really scrambling for their lives. And somehow it's not making the news. And I think it's important. When we talk about our Christian brothers and sisters, we need to be cognizant about the fact that they're all over the world. Same thing in Egypt to a certain extent with the Coptics, the Maronites in Lebanon. So this is a real Middle Eastern pandemic with respect to hate. What I find that's really troubling is that you have this group that wants to tear down these shrines that are holy to three major religions, including their own, which I don't quite get. You are right, Steve, what you said on the outset, that ISIS kind of caught everybody off guard. This is a group that Al-Qaeda basically shrugged off. They didn't particularly like their philosophy. Not that Al-Qaeda is any better, but at the same instance, look at what they have done. They have gone into Iraq and taken over major parts of that country, and now taking major parts of Syria, and they're creating one state. And the world community, I don't think, is doing a lot about it. We've got two different major hotspots at the same time. We have that, or three, if you count the Ukraine. But we also have what's going on in Israel and Gaza. Mm-hmm. And so it is just, it's really terrible. And I have to tell you, I was in Israel during the first Gulf War, and I was in Israel when the Scud missiles were coming over from Iraq, then led by Saddam Hussein. And Israel has been under besiege with almost 2,500 missiles from Gaza. And I can tell you, if anyone's ever been in an air raid alert where you have missiles coming over your head and you've got like 10 seconds to dive into an air raid shelter, it's pretty scary.
You talked a little bit about the Christians and the situation with them being kind of pushed out. I'm getting the idea that they're leaving because of intimidation right now. And that would seem to be that the public relations campaign of ISIS and Muslims seems to be working. Where are these Christians actually going? Do you know?
That's a really good question. And they, in Iraq, they were told, you either convert or, leave, or I think the exact
you had to pay a tax too,
or die by the sword. I think that's what they said. A lot of them, it's interesting. A lot of them have gone to Israel. Let's not forget, Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East, the only place where the three major religions are respected thoroughly. Some of them have gone to other more moderate places. A lot of them are going to Europe, but they are trying to get out. But the problem also is that to get out of Iraq is not so easy. And so, because a lot of these Christians do not have Iraqi passports. They either have French passports or Italian passports, or because that's also a problem. But I'm just wondering, Steve, and I guess I'm wondering out loud, why is it that the major networks just don't cover this story? And it is a major story. There are a lot of people who are, have come from good Christian backgrounds that are really, really having their lives threatened, and doesn't seem like it's getting any ink. Yeah,
I would agree with that. We're talking with Rabbi Steven Rosenberg. We're going to continue our discussion, and I want to get his perspective on the idea of United States negotiating or lack of it in the Middle East, because we seem to be having absolutely no impact in that region. We'll be back with the Rabbi coming up in just a couple minutes here on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Welcome back to Focus Today. Steve Johnson with you, and we are not averse to taking on the tough topics, and this one is probably the biggest in the decade, really. What's going on in the Middle East and the perspective of Rabbi Steven Rosenberg. He's the executive producer of TalkBack, the radio program with Dr. Lawrence Gelman, and I want to get right into the perspective that you're seeing, or perhaps the lack of perspective of the United States having an impact in the Middle East. Now, we have not been highly successful, but I think that we've seen different presidencies bring in negotiators who can at least collect the main leadership of whatever the controversy is. It might be to Camp David, to talk. Maybe something will come out of it, maybe something won't. I've never seen, though, the United States at this point having absolutely no voice in what's going on, and actually being mocked in the Jewish newspapers for the simplistic views that our Secretary of State is giving as solutions. What is your perspective? Is the United States actually very neutered in this entire discussion when we're talking about the Gaza and Israel?
That's such a great question. And the answer, to a certain extent, is yes. There is a disengagement by the current leadership in the White House. The Obama administration has been, it's been like the tail wagging the dog. There has not been any leadership with respect to the White House on this. And the leadership that has been very, very symbolic at best. You don't have, you had other presidents, whether it was Clinton or Carter or Bush, who took an initiative of personally involving themselves in this, bringing them, as you said, mentioned, to Camp David or other places, and really trying to hammer out an agreement. Part of the problem, though, and this is just coming through on the wires now, is now you have Gaza, which is run by Hamas, which is a terrorist organization, and you have the PA, the Palestinian Authority. Well, this morning, something really interesting happened where there was a quote by the PA that they would like to entertain something of a ceasefire or a halt for 24 hours. Hamas rejected it. So now you've got, the PA, or the political wing of the party, which is run by President Abbas, which administers really the West Bank. Mm-hmm. Then you have Hamas, which was elected by the people in Gaza and is a terrorist organization, which has now co-opted the PA in Gaza completely, and now has rejected this. And the spokesman there, Abu Zahari, says that, sorry, not going to happen. We're not going to listen to the PA. We are in charge here. So now the political wing of the Palestinians also has been neutered. So now what's a president to do? If I was president for a day, I would send somebody in there with a lot more gravitas than John Kerry. Whether that would be a Bill Clinton, whether that would be a Condoleezza Rice, I don't know. But I would send somebody in there who can garner the respect that Kerry obviously doesn't have. And that's important. When you have a president that has really disengaged himself in this whole process, this is what happens. It almost seems like he's just disinterested.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have kind of had those thoughts that way. But from what you're saying, if I can just elaborate, the United States could still play a role in this, but the right person has to be over there to be able to do that. And I'm looking at it saying, the president clearly also has to be the one to show that he has some resolve. So I would think that would have to happen first before this individual is sent back over there to help to restart these talks again.
Well, you also, you have to have what we call, you have to have a little skin in the game here. And the United States seems to be just in the background and not taking a lead role. And the problem is with that, we only have one superpower in the world today, and that's us. And if we don't step up to the plate, you're certainly not going to have a Germany or a Great Britain or any one of the European states do anything unless the United States comes to the lead. But it also has to do with symbolism, Steve. It needs to be somebody who has a little bit of political capital that they can expound on, and John Kerry just isn't it.
I've been taking kind of snapshots of the different social media comments that have come about, and of course we're getting all sorts of individuals from around the world who are weighing in on the issue. And I can't say that I've ever seen anything quite so polarized as what I'm seeing with the reaction to what's happening on the Gaza Strip and in Israel. And this is just, of course, obviously anybody who's got a YouTube password and name can go in and make a comment. But I'm looking at that saying, is this a reflection of how far apart the leadership is also with both Hamas and Israel? Do you see that this is a chasm that is going to be very hard to divide, or at that level, do you think there is still hope that we can come to, at first, a ceasefire and then some sort of a reconciliation?
Well, the problem is that you've got two factions you're dealing with respect to the Palestinians. You have Hamas, which has not only does not recognize Israel's right to exist, has absolutely stated its mission is the destruction of the state of Israel. So you have this player in Gaza that doesn't want to be a negotiating partner. All it wants to be is an instigator. You have, and I try to kind of make this into this analogy. If you were in Texas, I lived in Texas for a long time, and you live next to the Mexican border, and for some reason Mexico was starting to fire missiles into Texas, and dig tunnels underneath Mexico and come out into Texas and kidnap people, what do you think the response from the United States would be? At some point, somebody is going to say, stop it, or fire back. And what's happening, and I don't know how to, if you haven't been in this situation, to live in a modern society where now almost 24 hours a day, you have rockets raining over your borders, raining into Tel Aviv and into Eilat and into other areas. It's hit. You had a missile that came within a mile of Ben Gurion Airport. Yeah. Missiles that have come fairly close to Jerusalem. You can't live like that. I mean, I was in Israel during the first Gulf War. I know what it's like having missiles flying over your head. And if it wasn't for the Iron Dome, which has been phenomenal, and but I have to tell you, nobody wants to do a ground war. Nobody wants to send troops in to a hostile territory. As you can see from both sides, you know, the death count has been pretty high. But these tunnels, I don't know if you saw, CNN had this special on with Wolf Blitzer with him going down into one of the tunnels that the Israelis had captured. And this is the part that I think also needs to be really out there in front, and it's not. With the millions of dollars we have given to the Palestinians in humanitarian aid, over $1 million of it has been concrete. That went to build these tunnels.
I want to let our listeners and viewers know we're talking to Rabbi Steven Rosenberg. He's the executive producer of the TalkBack program with Dr. Lawrence Gelman. I want to ask a question that's kind of out there, but at some point when push comes to shove, we have seen this happen before. Do you have any anticipation that Israel could take back the Gaza Strip?
I don't think Israel. Well, no, we have to go back and look at history, and this is the part that really is amazing. What is the Gaza Strip? First of all, well, the Gaza Strip originally was part of Egypt, and it was taken during the 6 Day War and then the Yom Kippur Wars. This area was taken as a buffer. Israel couldn't give the land back. Because on that land were a lot of Palestinians. The problem with it has to do with where they come from. You know, name me one Arab country that has come to the aid of these people or have said, we'll take you in. There hasn't been it. You know, the 6 Day War was really interesting when Jordan thought that they were going to, and they knew that they were going to lose this piece of land. They basically pushed a lot of these Palestinians into the West Bank, and it became Israel's problem. Now, I don't think Israel wants to have the West Bank back. Wants to have Gaza back. You've got 2 million. You have 2 million. Palestinians in something about the size of Atlantic Beach. I mean, it's not very big. And in 2005 or so, Israel pulled out completely. And there was a treaty signed, there was a contract signed, there was a whole series of events that happened that said, we will pull out, we will not bother you as long as you don't bother us, as long as you don't shoot missiles at us or create, terrorism of any kind inside Israel's boundaries. That's fine. That didn't happen. And so what Israel is doing is not trying to conquer Gaza and not trying to take it over. They're trying to go through and systematically root out all of these tunnels. They're trying to get all of these tunnels done. They don't want to take over Gaza.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that perspective. I'll tell you, this is one of those things where we could talk all day on this, and I think that there's so many questions that still need to be answered. We'll just have to see how this all plays out. Rabbi Steven Rosenberg, executive producer of TalkBack with Dr. Lawrence Gelman. Appreciate you being with us. Thank you very much for that perspective.
Looking forward to talking to you again, and thank you for the time. I certainly appreciate it.
All right, thanks. And thank you for joining us for another edition of Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim, and I work at theDove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us.